Okay, so welcome to the security workshop. Today we're going to be covering DevSecOps and active security. So there's going to be two portions to this workshop. The first one's going to be interactive, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going over kind of how to create, how to add security scanners to a repository, how to do coverage fuzzing, how to do web API fuzzing, and how all that works within an MR and different approvals and everything. So let me just kind of run you through the schedule for today. Let me go ahead and share. Where's I don't think I have share permissions. Oh yeah, I do. Okay. All right. So in today's workshop, we're going to cover a couple of things. So DevSecOps and so the first part is going to be consisted of 5 lessons, which is going to be cloning a standard project, adding security scans to it, then going ahead and creating an MR, and then interacting with these vulnerabilities. Then we're also going to look at the security dashboard. We're going to look at what AppSec engineers would do, or the security team would do, to kind of triage these vulnerabilities, as well as assess the security posture of a project or group of projects. Then we're going to introduce coverage fuzzing and how that works and its benefits, and then web API fuzzing on top of that, which are newer features within GitLab. Then that'll cut the interactive session. And after that, I'll present on container network security and container host security. So, so let's get started. So I'm gonna resend this on the Zoom chat. Let's see. So go to this issue, and you'll have this invitation code. You'll go to the invitation URL and redeem your invitation code. And once that's done, you'll get a username and password and a URL to log into. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm already logged in. I'll sign out. And I'll log in. So now, this is standard demo systems flow. So I'm going to groups and to my groups, clicking on training users, clicking on my session, and then I'm going to find the one where I'm an owner. I'm going to go into that session, and I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to create a project from a template. And within here, you'll see that there is a group. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that group. And there'll be 2 projects here. So there'll be one that's the instructions that we're going to be running through today. And there'll be the actual project that we're using, which is the Simply Simple Notes Workshop Edition. So we're going to use this Simply Simple Notes Workshop Edition. We're going to use the template, and we can name it something like Friends Notes and create that project. So wait for that to create. And meantime, so in the meantime, any questions about this? This is just a standard flow for demo systems for importing a workshop project. Okay, and while we're waiting for that, okay, perfect. So project was successfully imported. So once that's done, we're going to just go ahead and run a pipeline so we can see the application. So what you can do is within your test group, let's see. Let me actually get the link for you. So here's a link to the instructions and sending in the Zoom chat. So that way we can follow through on each of the lessons. So
sorry, Fern, are we supposed to be doing this now in parallel with you, or are you just running through the process and then we'll do so after?
So if you'd like to, you can do it in parallel with me. I'm just going through like the whole workshop so everyone sees kind of the end-to-end flow, and then I'll talk about like the benefits to it. So it's what you prefer. Ideally, if you know how to do these things and you've done them before, there's no need to, but it's just kind of to get everyone used to the process and helps you better explain it to customers if you've done it before.
Okay, thanks.
It seems like the system is being like a little slow today, but that should be fine. I'll go over it as best as I can. So, and the instructions are all here. So you can do it at any time, and even if you want to go review it after this workshop, you can do it, or you can do it as well. So this is all the process that we did. So now the step 2, we're going to go ahead and run pipeline. So let's go back here. We're going to go to CI/CD pipelines, and then we're going to go ahead and run a pipeline on the master branch. So we'll just go ahead and click run pipeline. And this is what you should see. So you should see a build stage, and then after that, a deploy stage. So build stage, let me go through the explanation while that's taking some time to load. So the build stage is just going to build the container from the Docker file and push it up to the GitLab repository. So that way we can use it in our applications. And the deploy is actually going to use the Helm chart that I've created, and it's going to deploy it via Helm. So it'll put it into our Kubernetes cluster in the staging namespace. And just to kind of show you, I wanted to showcase this because there's a lot of times where customers are going to have custom Helm files. I would imagine, like as a developer, most developers are not going to be using auto DevOps per se, because they already have custom scripts that they want to run, and they have custom deployments, so they don't want a default deployment set. So what happens is they'll have these custom Helm charts, and one thing that I think would be great is to kind of help customers know that they can easily have their old Helm charts, like the Helm charts that they did before they migrated to GitLab. They can actually use those easily within our infrastructure. So, and this can be seen in this charts repository. I have different Helm charts. So I have one that actually deploys the notes application. So it'll actually deploy the deployment, which contains the application pods, the service, which will expose it within the cluster, and then the ingress that'll expose it outside. So it deploys all those 3 things. And if I could get this to scale, you would see that once deploy staging is run, you'll be able to see your application, and you'll be notified on exactly what your application is. So seems like maybe there's some scaling issues today. So hopefully I can continue with this. If not, I do have a backup with another application, but I'm gonna just hope that this runs as smooth as possible.
I'm really working on the slowness.
Oh, Cristiano's
This is
working.
Jeff. I'm looking at it too. Something's up in the code. I'm not sure what's going on yet.
Okay, yeah, no worries. So yeah, the pipeline will run, and what you'll see is this is exactly what you'll see. And then from there, you'll be deployed on, it'll be deployed on this URL. So I'll give it some time. I guess while we're waiting for that, I can talk a little bit about the security scans that we have in general. So if you're aware of like all the different offerings that we have SAST that analyzes the the static source code. We have DAST that analyzes the running application. There's container scanning, which scans the Docker container images. Dependency scanning, which will scan your project's dependencies. And then there's also license scanning. So you can set a policy on restrictive. So you can set a policy so that way you block an MR from being merged if there's any restrictive licenses. And then there's also secret detection, which can find any secrets that you may have checked into your code base. So the documentation is really, really nice. So one thing, SAST, GitLab, you can just search it. And there's just few things to know. The languages that are supported. So you can see what languages are supported and what tool is actually used. So we use a lot of open source tools, and one key focus of this is that all these tools, although they're not developed by GitLab, they are maintained. We do maintain them, and we do maintain them on our infrastructure to make sure that they will always be working and running for you. So that's a big takeaway. Even though they are open source tools, we're maintaining these open source tools in our infrastructure for you to use, which is a big selling point over, hey, these are free things, why can't I just do it myself? Well, if there's a version update or there's a break or something breaks, you have to resolve that, and that costs developers time. There's also work on our own SAST analyzers. So instead of using open source, there will be our own language or our own scanning tool to be used for some languages. So right now you can see which ones are used. For example, we can also check Helm charts with kubesec and see if there's vulnerabilities on that. A bunch of other stuff. There's also mobile supported. So I have some projects where I've tried out mobile. So that supports Kotlin, Java, Swift, and Objective-C. So, okay, build job kicked off. Okay, so build job's kicking off now. So
sorry about that. GCP got stuck spinning up runners, so I just reset them all.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Jeff. All right, so yeah, I'll just continue to talk about this for a little bit while that continues. So you can see what's offered. So SAST comes in the free tier, so users can start using it. But then in the ultimate tier, there's just a couple of different things that SAST adds, which you can see here in this feature summary. And one of the main selling points of Ultimate is that you can really manage these vulnerabilities within the security dashboard and vulnerability dashboard as well. So okay, let's go back and see. So okay. So another thing to consider about SAST is that it is configurable depending on the scanner. So you can use a bunch of different environment variables to change the way that different scanners work. So just know that you have a lot of customization at your side to be able to configure this appropriately, but you have to know exactly what variables that you can use. So for each scanner, there's different variables that can be used for this. So you can go through the documentation and see exactly what needs to be done and what can be done to change the different paths and everything. Yeah, the iOS and Android app is an experimental feature, so you have to turn on experimental features to be true. And then there's also a JSON format report, which actually adds a lot of detailed customization that can be done. So something that can be done is users can write their own logic around this. So since you get this JSON output to you, you can write a parser to perform some type of custom action. So this is one thing that's actually really nice is that with this file, users can write their custom scripts and then they can perform some type of custom action. So for example, let's say they found 3 vulnerabilities within a production branch, they can immediately send that to PagerDuty or something like that and alert developers. So that's another pro that a lot of people don't really talk about is the customization of what you can do after the vulnerabilities are found within reports. So another thing that is a key thing is the offline scanning. So note that you can run all these scanners offline in a limited connectivity environment or in an environment that does not have any access to the internet. So you can check vulnerable code offline. So, and we'll talk about that later. Let's see if we can get back into the project.
Hey, Fern, a quick question. When you mentioned that a differentiator for us is that we support these scanners within our tool, within the infrastructure. So if there are problems or new versions, we're taking care of that. But we don't support, this is more of a question, but do we support, if there was a bug in one of these scanners, it's not as if our customers can open a ticket and we'll fix it. We're waiting for those to get fixed in the upstream open source scanners. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So if there was, for example, Bandit is what's used for Python. If there was a bug in one of the Bandit versions, that we wouldn't be able to, I mean, we can have people on it fix it, depending on how big the issue is, but it would be dependent overall on the community to accept that change.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, just to kind of keep going over that. So so these are the open source ones, and then as you said, if there is some type of bug in it, especially on the beta versions, right? We won't see that now. It is easy for us to contribute a fix. So I actually contributed a fix to MobSF. It wasn't picking up a Kotlin bug because of the rule set wasn't right. It was missing something dumb. It was missing like a semicolon. So I changed the rule set in there and they accepted my change. So I was able to actually download the newest version and then run that scanner on my repository and it took. So usually just having someone that can be able to work with these communities in case there are any potential bugs is something beneficial. Okay, so it seems like
a question on that note. How can customers contribute to that? Because that support for Kotlin scanner, Carfax they've been wanting it for their Android builds. They found a workaround that Aster had an issue on. And what their question was like, how can I contribute to this? Because they would like to, since we're not doing a lot of work on it at the moment. It's not like a dig or anything. He was just like, I want to be able to contribute. And then also in that same vein, they said, how can we make issues against the analyzers? Right now, there's no good workflow to comment on those. And it would be nice if those analyzers could have their permissions changed so they can report issues and work on them. I don't know if that's a GitLab thing and we needed to table that. I just wanted to bring it up since Jonathan had brought that up, and that's almost the exact same question I got on those two issues or problems.
Gotcha. No, that's a good question. So what they would do is, so first thing they would do is they would see what analyzers being used, right? So they go into documentation, then, okay, so now I am using, I have an Android application running on Kotlin. I see that this is a scanner used. So I'd go here and I'd go to this page, and they might have a like how to contribute page, or they might have like documentation on the best practices of how to contribute. So here they'll have a, usually these projects will have a contribution page. And then what will happen is they'll have to actually either do a bug report, or they can contribute a feature and create a pull request on GitHub. And then from there, whenever we use the newer version, then those changes will be propagated there. So that's they would have to contribute via the project itself.
Okay, that helps. I think that's what they were thinking, but they were like, I don't really want to go there. But okay, cool. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and it could be a tedious process depending on every community and every project where operates differently, and there's also different rules to contribute. So it just depends on how badly they need that change, or how much time they're willing to spend to contribute that change.
Okay, it's high. So yeah, I'll tell them to go there. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no worries.
Just
So,
a quick update for you, Fern. We're going to have about half success, half failure on pipelines. The runners that are up and running are good, but GCP API is down right now. And so what we're seeing right now is everything that's new getting provisioned is failing. So I'll watch it, but I can't control that right now. I can only debug it.
okay, yeah, I'll try to do this as smoothly as possible, and just give more information while this is getting fixed. But thanks for helping out and getting that done. So what I'll do, I guess, and due to these little issues that are happening, what I'll do is I'll just run you through each scanner, and we can have this as an interactive question answer session. So I'll walk you through all the different types of security scans, and then I have another project in case this can't work that has coverage fuzzing and web API fuzzing. So then I can show you that stuff as well. So is everyone good with that so far?
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
Would it be
So-
possible for us to take a pause and let everybody get their project set up? I know I'm sort of distracted by trying to figure out this configuration. Are we supposed to be configuring or not at this point?
So the first thing would be the lesson one, which would just be like adding the project to your, it would just be adding the project to your namespace, and then just running a pipeline to deploy the application. So that's all the only step that we've gone through so far.
Yeah, I'm unable to get the project to clone, things like that. So do we just should we
Gotcha.
on?
I can give some time for you to try that out. I can have like a little, we can have like a little 5-minute break to do that, and then I can continue walking through the scanners just so everyone's up to speed.
Okay.
From the demo system side, if you are seeing something that is stuck, please post in the demo systems channel and I can debug from the back end.
Yeah, and for cloning, the instructions are here. So let me just post the lesson one instructions, because it won't be cloning. It'll actually be just setting it up from a template. John Woods just posted that on the chat. Well, that's doing.
So on my build, it's failed 3 times. So it doesn't say it's going to retry again. Should I just, I don't know what to do.
If you're getting the runner failure where it's coming up with the preparing Docker machine, preparation failed exit status 1, retry, just let it sit for a little while and try clicking it again in say 5 minutes or so. What's going on right now is that we use Docker machine to scale up our runners. And so we have 100 Docker machine instances that spun up about half an hour ago now. And what ended up happening with it is it goes through a process of creating a VM. And then it goes and basically installs Docker and kind of runs a init script, right? Like a bash script to start it up, and then does the GitLab runner and the registration. The GitLab API, the GCP API right now for VMs is down. And so what we're seeing is that it cannot make that initial SSH connection to actually provision the machines. So it's just very inconvenient timing. This is not normal. This is not what we usually see in our workshops like this. And so the auto scaling mechanism is working on our end, but it can't connect enough to the VMs to actually register the runners. And so there's only a couple runners that are active right now. And because we have so many users in the workshop, only a couple of them are working. And so some people are having success. Other people are waiting in queue. And what I'm trying to do right now is flush out our runners. So the ones that think they're registered, they're actually stuck and they can't be communicated with. So what you're seeing is you're on a stuck runner. So I'm trying to clear that out, and then we'll be able to retry that in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay, well, since that's happening, so I'll go over, let me just keep going over like the different scanners, just so that way in the best interest of everyone's time. So then there's the container scanner, and that'll scan the different versions, different images. So for example, let me go. So in your Docker file, you'll have different images like from, and then you'll have an image version. So what it does is it'll scan for vulnerabilities within the code, within the actual image version, and see if there's any CVEs present. So what it'll do is a lot of times, like you might be using an older version of Alpine, and then there'll be some vulnerabilities detected and you didn't know. When this scanner runs, it'll find out that there's CVEs, it's time to update this, and it'll allow you to update update your container, so that way you don't have these known CVEs on there that hackers can go ahead and use to access your system. So it uses Claire and Clar for as the open source tools in the backend to perform this. So just in case like anyone asks what tools are used, you can see Clar and Claire.
Just to confirm, we're moving away from Claire and Clar in the future, though, aren't we?
Yes, we are right now. Right now, that's what we're using. But I think most of our tools are actually going to be something built in-house. Same for DAST as well. Right now, we're using Zap, and that's going to be more something in-house in the future.
Okay, cool.
So Fern, this almost checks against the base image as defined in that Docker file.
What was that?
So this container scanning, it basically scans the vulnerabilities of the base image as defined in that Docker file, right? From that from statement.
Correct. Yeah. So that's like one of the main things. So you can, I think I can show you real quick on an MR that I have. So, for example, so this one, okay, there was no vulnerabilities found in that, but let's go to the vulnerability report and let's go to container scanning. So it'll find like the CVEs that were detected within like, so that image in Alpine 3.7, for example, it found that this particular dependency within that was affected by this CVE. And then you can see like what the CVE is and what effect it has on the system. So that's kind of what it does. It'll scan like the container, all the container images and the base images and everything that you're using, and then it'll see if there's any CVE found within that actual container image. And Simon, you posted Trivy. Is that what we're migrating to?
Yeah, I think going forward, Claire and Clara are going to be replaced by Trivia in 14.0. But obviously, so just in case anyone on the call gets asked, you know, Claire and Clara are being used currently, but Trivia will be the future from 14.0 onwards. Yeah.
So yeah, another good thing to know. Then dependency scanning. So it'll look through your dependency file. For example, in Python, we use requirements.txt to store all our dependencies. And it'll look through these. And then usually like the way that you do it here, I'm just using like the newest versions because I only have a name. But usually I'll do like greater than or equal to, and then give a version number. And what dependency scanning will do is it'll scan those version numbers, and from there it'll figure out if there's actually a vulnerability or CVE within that version number. So if you see here, you can see that dependency scanning found, you know, this issue. Found that Django has this issue in it. It'll tell you it's in requirements.txt, and then the reason why it found that is because in this change, I added Django and I added a vulnerable version, the 2.0.0. So what it'll do is it'll look through all these versions like, oh, okay, you're using this old version of Flask here. There's some vulnerabilities in that. I'm going to tell you what they are. So when you see it in the merge request view, you can see that, hey, there's some big vulnerabilities in Django. Oh, there's a DOS attack that's possible in Flask because of this version. So, and then, yeah, like you'll see the links to the CVE. So it's like, oh, okay, you were using an older. So then, and this is a big thing because many applications these days are heavily built from dependencies. That dependencies do a particular job better than like a developer would do to add it to, because then they have to rewrite all this logic, and their specialty is not, for example, Python requests. Their specialty is not making you know, libraries to make requests. They'll use one that's already available and has probably been tested and used more. So they'll use that library. But at the same time, that library can be vulnerable. So having these constant scans running all the time to figure out what dependencies are vulnerable are actually very beneficial. So that way you don't expose yourself that way.
Hey, Fern, I have a question for you, right? So if a vulnerability gets detected, you know, in a merge request by a developer, it shows as detected, right? I do not see the ability for the developer to change that to confirm status. I only see that ability in like the security and compliance dashboard when you take that route, but that is based on what is in the master branch. Is there a specific logic behind a developer not being able to confirm that, or did I miss an area where they can actually change it? Maybe I don't fully understand the workflow of why a developer couldn't confirm that a vulnerability is there. Maybe he doesn't want to do anything about it, but at least wants to confirm it.
So the logic right now behind this is that this is not in production, right? So this branch is its own branch that's not in production, and you don't know if it's going to be pushed. So right now, the only things that you have are to be able to dismiss it or create an issue on it to work on it later. So the only confirmation can be done on the master branch. and all these things are limited towards security professionals, because the whole logic is that a developer themselves doesn't have the expertise to be able to confirm or deny or triage this. This should be something that's more involved to someone more security scoped or more of an administrator on the project. So it's not really like developer versus AppSec engineer versus this. It's more like, if you are, let's say, the tech lead, right, and you're a maintainer on the project, then from the security dashboard, you're the one who's doing the triage, not just like the general developer working on the team. So it's more like, you don't want just a developer on the team to be changing this. You want the person with the authority to make these, because these are big changes, like confirming or dismissing it or doing any of these things are pretty big changes that can that can affect the system. So developers can dismiss it, they can give a reason why, but everything else is only done through the vulnerability report.
Mhm.
So I think you have a good point. I think developers kind of should be able to add, because if they can dismiss it, right, they should be able to add different statuses, and then they should be all seen here, by the admin.
I mean, I kind of get your point, but I would counter that by saying, if we're trying to sell, the whole mantra of shifting that security left and putting that in the hands of the developer, right? Or at least giving the developer a lot more control over it, I would tend to think that you'd at least give them an ability to put it in a confirmed state. I mean, I might be nitpicking over something that is, really not that important. Anyway, like I said, I was just curious why that was the.
No, you come up with a good viewpoint, right? Because what ends up happening here is, you see a developer can dismiss the vulnerability, and they can say like, oh, this is because I am, this is a test case, right? I wanted it to run through the pipeline and find this, and this will be resolved in the final code push, right? Like, let's say this is a work in progress branch, and I can just dismiss the vulnerability and say like, hey, this branch is a work in progress, and this is just for testing it through the pipeline, right? And they can dismiss it, and if it gets merged, it'll be merged with the status of dismissed. But following that same logic, you should also be able to confirm it, like, hey, I tested it, I confirmed that this is a vulnerability on the system, and it's going to be merged. But yeah, I'm now that I think about it, yeah, I mean, you might want to dismiss it, but you might not want to approve it, because you shouldn't want to merge things that are detected, right? You should keep wanting to reiterate on it and continue to reiterate on it until there's no issues. And you only dismiss it if it's just like a test case or something that it picked up a bug in, right? Like you're using a test case that has a test token, like web token, and the web token really doesn't have any access to anything. It's just like a test web token that you're putting in there. It'll detect it. And then in that case, you would want to dismiss it because it's just being used for the tests. For example. So I think being able to dismiss it is fine, but then confirming it should be something that someone with administrative purposes should do, and actually deleting it should be someone with administrative purposes.
Fern, and I want to understand. I want to know if I understand better and well the situation. When we are in the context of the merge request, and our scanners are finding new vulnerabilities, those vulnerabilities are not yet and didn't hit yet and doesn't hit yet master. So the report we have here is only shows vulnerabilities that was added for changes within this merge request.
Correct.
That doesn't mean that our master branch doesn't have vulnerabilities. All the vulnerabilities we have in the master branch, we can see it in the security dashboard. So, and am I okay with that and understanding? So if we dismiss the vulnerability here, doesn't mean it's going to hit master. So that does mean that we won't have this vulnerability dismissed on the vulnerability report, and until we get merged. And to get merged, we need that approval.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yes, so that's correct. So the flow, the intended flow will be, so this merge request will be up, right? And then now I'm going to review it. And let's say this one, let's just dismiss it so I can just have it there. Okay. So now I'm the reviewer of this code, right? Developer pushed this and I'm reviewing it. So I'm looking through it, and ideally the developer will keep iterating on it until there's no vulnerabilities, unless there's a vulnerability that has to go out. So let's say like this has to go out for whatever reason, right? We have to run it in debug mode. So this vulnerability comes out because debug is set to true. So let's say we have to run this server in debug mode for whatever reason, and we're going to run it in production and debug mode for 2 weeks because we want to assess this problem, right? So then the developer would have dismissed this and saying, we need to run this in debug mode for 2 weeks, right? For a performance test, right? So what ends up happening is I'm reviewing this, I'm a reviewer, and I see that this is crossed out. I'll click on it and go, oh, okay, so it needs to run in debug mode for 2 weeks. And then they created an issue on it. So I know this issue has to do with this, and we can assess how long we're going to run it, and then we can resolve it later. And then what I end up doing is I review it, and then let's say everything else looks good and there was no other vulnerabilities, I'll go ahead and merge this and approve it and just merge it, right? So once I merge it, then you go into the vulnerability report, and when I sort by dismissed, that vulnerability that I checked in will be there. So now let's say I look by dismissed, that vulnerability that I checked in that was dismissed will be here as dismissed. So then when I'm doing a triage of the system, I can see what was dismissed, why it was dismissed. And let's say now when I do the fix, that'll be taken out and it'll be resolved. So I mean, there's just two different workflows. One is just for reviewing, and then once it's merged, it's for actually assessing the whole security posture of the project in general. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Thank you very much for.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, like it's just two different viewpoints. One viewpoint is for reviewing, and then you can see what's dismissed in the review and why it's dismissed. So that way you know that you can merge it, even though that there's that vulnerability there. And then the second view is like once it has been merged, you can see if it's still there, and it's been dismissed, and then you can kind of go through it, and you can change the status to resolve, and you can go in, and then you can actually like see the issue and investigate it more. So yeah, so it's just two different intended uses.
When I usually explain this, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, when somebody resolves a vulnerability through the security dashboard, is that recorded somewhere?
So yeah, so I'll show you that now. So when you go to resolved, you'll see it. Yeah, you'll see the status is resolved, and when you click on it, you can see that I resolved it. So you have an audit trail of exactly what actions have been done.
Very good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, when I usually explain to the customer this situation, I always explain in terms of two contexts. One context in the context of the merge request, when you find new vulnerabilities that are included for the change within the merge request. And another context for the master or the protect branches, where we are, and in that context, we see all the vulnerabilities in the vulnerability report. Mm-hmm. So I always explain in two contexts. One context for the merge request, another context for the master branch in the vulnerability report.
Yeah, I think that's the right way of explaining it, because it kind of like separates the reviewer from the person that's assessing the posture and that's performing an audit on the system, essentially.
I I think it's important probably for, in case Ricardo didn't know, is if you're in the merge request, you see the initial vulnerabilities. Those are the net new vulnerabilities. But then if you look at the full report is net new plus whatever it pulled in from, you know, the master branch, assuming that you created that feature branch off of that master branch.
So yeah, you're talking about this full report right here.
If you look at that full report, that is what was already in master at the time, plus, or in the default branch, plus whatever got introduced as part of that merge request.
And then, yeah, you can even sort by the dismissed.
Okay, that's great.
So it's a helpful tab to see. A lot of times, like what I show is mostly like the new detected ones, the diff. But yeah, this is also pretty helpful to see, like a breakdown of everything in case they want to not do it through the security dashboard. So it's a good helpful tool.
Is this in the context of the merge request or including the master branch as well?
It's in the context of it's everything, right? The master plus the merge request.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So yeah. Like
hey, Fern, I have a quick update for you on the runners. Short version for everybody who's curious or what's going on. So GCP has an API rate limit of 2,000 requests per 100 seconds. We are pegging over that right now. I don't know why. So something is rogue on the back end with one of our 160 runners that have been trying to run. My guess is something can't connect, and so it's constantly pinging it. Fern, my suggestion right now would be to go through the labs as if you're just demoing what the lab steps are and plan on asynchronous consumption of these. I might get it fixed in the next hour, but I'm trying to kill things off and flush things out, and half of the requests are failing because the API is pinged. So I have to completely expunge our system and kind of do a little bit of a rebuild. So it's gonna be more than a couple minutes. So I would go forth as assuming we're not using the labs for right now and just do what you need to do to demo it for now.
Okay, that works. I can do that.
Can I ask you another question? Sometimes in a merge request, I see that a vulnerability has a status of fixed. How does it end up in a status of fixed?
So are you talking about here in the vulnerability report?
No, in the merge request itself.
Oh, okay. Like
that section up there, right? When you expand it out, instead of saying new, it will say fixed. And I might not have done anything. It just shows up as fixed.
So sometimes that's a bug. Usually it should only show fixed if when in your new change you fix something that was in master. So let's say there was an vulnerability, like let's say a dependency in master that was vulnerable, and you updated that dependency. When in this thing, it should show it as fixed in here. But sometimes there's a bug where it'll show new vulnerabilities under the fix tab. But I think that's been resolved already. I know what you're talking about.
I'll give you like a use case, and maybe that is intended. Like I might have done work on a feature branch, and I introduced a token, say to AWS, right? And I merge it into the default branch, and then maybe on a different merge request, I do something else. But it obviously has that token that got merged into the default branch. That now will show up as fixed, even though I haven't done anything. It's in my mind still, new or however you would want to classify that, but certainly not as fixed. I introduced it on a previous merge request, went through default or through master, comes in on a new merge request. I understand it's still there because I didn't take it out. But showing that it got fixed is a little, I think, misleading maybe to a developer. Like initially, I was like surprised to see it that way.
So if you can show me that next time, like whenever you have time, like a screenshot, so we can post that. I know that was an issue where there was a bug where it was showing even vulnerabilities that were found as fixed. As far as I know, they had resolved that. I had pointed that out before. But if it's still an issue, if you can post that, and we can open up an issue with the the PM.
Okay, I'll take it offline. Thank you.
So, okay, so yeah, so I'll continue to run through each scanner, and I'll go through the workshop as if it were live, and then you can run the instructions on your own time if we don't get this resolved. So next thing, so we went over container scanning, we went over dependency scanning, we went over SAST. Let's go over DAST. So dynamic application security testing, it goes ahead and sends requests to a running application to try to find a vulnerable path or something vulnerable within the application and try to extract information. So right now we are using the OAuth SAP, which will be replaced by an internal tool. So this is right now the open source project that's being used, the ZAP proxy. And that's what's, we're generating a container with that in it, and then we're going ahead and sending requests to the running application. And we have to provide the URL. So here's an important thing to note. So DAST can be run within a pipeline, so it can always be run at the end. But there's a lot of people who don't want necessarily to be hitting that running application every single pipeline. So there's also a way to run DAST at your own time. Like you can just create a job that just runs DAST. So that way you don't have to have it in the pipeline every time. You can just create an on-demand scan and run DAST whenever you want. It's also useful when you want to actually attack like a different endpoint. So go through there. So can you change the port as well? I'm not too sure if you can. I know you can put the port in the actual website. Like if the application is done through a port, you can put that there. But can you change the port that ZAP runs on? That I'm not sure. And ZAP can also be run against the review app. So usually if the application is pretty heavy, you might want to run it against a staging environment because you want to deploy it in something as close to production as possible. But it'll also work on the review app for lighter weight applications, yes. And even if it's password protected, you can also add like a username and password to test. So there's a bunch of different configurations. An important thing to note is that we're migrating away from ZAP to our own in-house scanner. So I'm gonna try to show you. Let me see if this is running on this project, and I'm gonna try to show you that. So this. So this is the notes application. So this is the application that in your project you would deploy once you use the project, but you can just add notes and it'll add a note to the system. And then you can also delete a note. So if I put 40, I can delete a note. And if you see all this meow, 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 that's all from the web API fuzzing that went ahead and tried to insert different things. You know, so you see Peach, it's from the acquisition of Peach Fuzz. So you can see that the web API fuzzing tried to send a whole bunch of different data to try to break the system. So let me show you, let's run a DAST job against this application. So we know that this is the application. We can go to some security and compliance and we can go to on-demand scans. So we can create a scanner profile. We can run it on the master branch. Let's see. So within the scanner profile, I named it my DAST. The spider is what crawls through the site and finds all the URLs and everything to hit. So I'm giving it no timeout. The target timeout, I'm going to set it to 3,600 seconds. And I'm going to turn on the spider and show debug messages. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to have the site profile. So this is the site that I want to hit. So I want to hit this, and I want to hit the path notes. So it'll hit notes and then every path behind /notes. So there's /add to add a node on the API. There's /delete. There's all those paths that are part of this main notes path. So I'm gonna set it to the notes path. I'm gonna save the profile. And then I am gonna go ahead and name this scan today's DAST. Give it a quick information, scan for SQL. So one thing about this tool, you can actually scan any URL that you want. So don't scan the FBI or CIA domains. So it can actually scan anything. It's not just limited to your application and to your site. So if you have different infrastructure pieces that you want to go ahead and run a SAS scan on, you can go ahead and do that as well. So I don't know if there's going to be any changes around that. I don't know what, I mean, there may be concerns about that because it can literally scan anything. I can scan yahoo.com and run that on that. So I'm not sure if this will be scoped towards just the, like your load balancer IP or what infrastructure that you have. So, but for right now, I can scan anything. So I'm going to go ahead and save and run the scan. And you can see that new job runs with only DAST. So this is just telling me run DAST on this URL and tell me any vulnerabilities that you find. So I'll leave that running and we'll just wait for that to run and then we'll come back. Give me 1 second. Okay, so, okay, well, this is working now. So deployed to staging. And you have the Simply Simple Notes application. So if you're able to follow along with this, then can customers set instance-wide blacklist to prevent users? So right now, you cannot set any instance-wide blacklists for that. So they can literally scan anything that they want. So that's could be a concern. So that's something that we'll have to bring up. So that's a good point there. Okay, so continuing on, DAST is running, and it's going to go ahead and start setting up different connections and trying to run that application. So we'll let that run. Okay. So the lesson that we're on is lesson 2. So lesson 2 involved adding the security scans to the infrastructure. So, and I'm going to just show you that now with this. So, and let me just give you this project. So this is the project that a lot of sales teams use. So if you see that project in tech marketing, a lot of sales will use that to kind of showcase the different features to the customers. So, and you can go ahead and feel free to use that project for whatever your needs are and clone it if you need to show it within, GitLab.com. But I just wanted to show you that this lesson, what it would involve is how to add the security scans. So in order to add the security scans, it's pretty simple. You do include, and then you would add the different templates. So there would be SAS, dependency scanning, license scanning, container scanning, and DAST. So, and so we would go ahead and add these, and we would add them to the template. And then from there, it'll go ahead and run. So that's the way of actually just adding security scans. And then from there, everything will just run within this test stage. So just make sure that you have the test stage present. And what that will do is it will create this pipeline here. Not this. This is the DAST one. So this is the DAST one that finished running that I just did. But you'll see that, and there'll be a security tab, and you can see everything that DAST picked up on the single scan. So that's just to highlight that. But if I were to go into the main pipeline, which is right here, you can see that all the scans are present here. So, and then you can also see that there's like Bandit SAS, there's ESLint SAS, there's a CubeSec SAS. So it's running different scanners per language. So since I have the Kubernetes running, the Kubernetes SAS enabled, it'll also run that and find any vulnerabilities on there. And then you see that the way that I set this up, so it's highly customizable. So I build it, I run all these static scans, I do the fuzzing test, I deploy to staging, then I run the API fuzzing and DAST as well after that. So I'm hitting this application with all sorts of tests to try to break it, to try to find where it's most vulnerable so I can continue to assess the situation. So going back to the CI file, you can see that there's also variables that I add that tell the scanners how to run. So scan Kubernetes Manifest true enables the Kubernetes Manifest scanner, which scans like my Helm templates and the YAML files. I add the URL for DAST to run on. And then these are for fuzzing, which I'll show you later, but it'll tell me what fuzzing profile I use, what open API file I use, and what URL I target for the web API fuzzing. So now to go into the next part of lesson two would just show you how to add these scanners.
Hey, Fern.
Yeah.
I get a question from Christoph in the chat.
Any reason why not API fuzzer and DAST in parallel, or potential false positives? So the reason that we don't want to do it in parallel is because they're both they can both crash the application, right? They're both sending a bunch of requests. So we don't want, we want to know what exactly is causing the crash. So I'm doing them independently instead of parallel, because we don't want that same application to be being hit by a bunch of different requests from different places at the same time. And is there potential for false positives? There is. That's something that we continuously work on improving that within our own scanners. And it's kind of a thing that's been brought up. We do offer in our in-house scanners that we're developing, we do have lots of less false positives than other competitors. You can ask within the secure channel to get that information so you can show that to customers. But of course, with any of these scans, you're always going to run into false positives. So Chester, are there any operating system level scans that run and detect misconfigurations or ports that are open and can lead to security vulnerabilities? So right now, that will be part of the second part of this session, which would be container host security and container network security. So there are ways of creating network policies and actually policies that run on the actual container host itself to detect if there's anything, if there's any misconfiguration. These can actually be customized. So that's done using Falco. So I'll give a demonstration of that during the second part of this session. So to continue on, so going on to, so we've covered a good amount of stuff now. So from the session. So what lesson 2 involved was adding these scanners to your GitLab CI YAML and adding these stages. So it'll just show you exactly kind of how to do that and run through the flow, so that way you get a good understanding of that. So opening up the web IDE, going to GitLab CI YAML, and then what we're going to do here is we would just go ahead and we would see, okay, these are the templates that we need to include. So here in the include, we'd replace that with these templates here for the different security scans. And you can see that there's also this remote here. That's to use the Docker and Docker service so that we're not using the, we're not going out to Docker because of its rate limit. So we're using an internal one that James made for us. So to help out with, to make the process smoother. So that's what that remote is for. So then you would actually, after the build stage, we'd put a test stage. Then on the deploy stage, we would put the dash stage to run on our deployment. And then I've also included the scan Kubernetes manifest. So we want to scan Kubernetes, add that as a variable. And then we want to run on this path with Dast. So we set that up. We press commit it to the master branch. And then we can go back, and then we should have a pipeline running that looks like this. So that would be after step 2. And then from there, you would be able to see the security scans running. And to kind of show you within this project, then you would have something like this. So then the second step, so then in the second step, right, what you would do is you would actually create a merge request with vulnerable code. So what I've done is in lesson 3, I show you how to how to add vulnerable code. So for example, this would be vulnerable code because in this manifest file, it's not setting any type of limits on CPU. It's not setting any limits on memory. So that can be considered something that could affect your Kubernetes system. I'm adding something that's possibly because the ID is passed, and the ID can be anything. This is susceptible to SQL injection. We're lowering the version of Alpine to one that has known vulnerabilities. We're adding new routes that can possibly be vulnerable because it doesn't have any checks on input. Same thing, we're adding secrets and tokens. We're lowering versions in the requirements. So these will be ways of actually creating a vulnerability. So if I look at lesson 3, there'll be information on actually creating a vulnerability. So this is important because you can show customers exactly what vulnerabilities look like, and you'll be able to create them themselves. So John had a question. If I dismiss a vulnerability in the MR, will it also appear dismissed in a separate MR and feature branch? So I believe it will not. I think it's only in the context of the actual feature branch. So let's say I dismiss it in branch A and then I do branch B, it won't show dismissed in branch B, even though it was dismissed in branch A and it's the same vulnerability. Okay, so let's continue to go through the process through this while this is running. So once you submit some vulnerable code, there's a few things that you can see. When you can view eligible approvers, and we can set these rules. So by going here to settings general, and I click on merge request approvals, there are actually ways to set approval rules for license check and vulnerability check. So what this lets me do is anyone who's in this group, right, for the license check, will have to approve if there's a denied license detected before the MR can actually be merged. And for the vulnerability check, anyone that's added to this group will have to approve if there is a high critical or unknown vulnerability detected. So these are safeguards that are present. So that way you're not letting just developers just merge code without review if there's something vulnerable there. There's actually other safeguards present too that are pretty useful. Require new approvals when new commits are added to the MR. So if I just change the commit and now the MR can be completely different, I'll require approval again. Prevent users from modifying approval rules in merge requests. Prevent MR approvers from authors. So a lot of times you shouldn't let the person who created the merge request approve it themselves. It could be a safeguard to just have another pair of eyes on it is always useful. So you can add different safeguards like that. And if you're very paranoid about a particular things getting moved, you can actually even require passwords for that. So let's see how that looks. So it's shown as optional here. Let me see if I can find the place where.
Demo systems update, all the runners are fixed, so you can run a pipeline if you need to.
Okay, perfect. Okay, everything seems to be running now. All right, so let me start doing it on here then. Let me set it up on here, and I'll run it from the beginning so that way I can show you the full flow. So in order to add merge request approvals on an empty project with nothing in it, you'll see these things, vulnerability check and license check, and you'll see a button enable next to it. So you'll click enable, and here you can actually add pretty much anyone that you want as an approver. You can add a person or a group. So it can be the security team, it can be a list of administrators, it can be anything. So I'm just going to add demo systems users. And then I'm going to do the same thing for license check. Demo systems users. And I'm also going to add myself like to this, so my user ID, so that way I can just be able to merge it myself. So add approval rule, edit, add approval rule. So okay, so I added myself, and then my user ID is here. It's seen here. So I just added myself to that, and now that the pipeline's running, and you can see everything working nicely, we're going to go ahead and just create add some vulnerable code. So for simplicity, I'm going to go to the web IDE, and I'm going to go into notes, DB, and I'm going to look at lesson 3. So lesson 3 is going to show me, okay, so in notes db.py, I'm going to add, so notes db.py, I'm going to add under this connection block, I'm going to add 777 permissions to the database file, the notes db file. So then in routes.py, I'm going to go ahead and add a new route. So I'll just add a new route to the end. There'll be a new path called get with vulnerabilities. I am going to add a Kubernetes Manifest that creates, it runs an application called node hello. So that I'm going to go into chart, templates, and I'm going to create a new file called vulns.yaml, create the file. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and add all these different vulnerabilities to requirements.txt. Change that. And I'm going to change the Docker file to use an older version of Alpine. So these are the changes that I've made. Before doing that, though, I wanted to make sure that we have a license policy set up just so I can showcase that. So under the security and compliance tab, there is a thing called license compliance. And these are so far the projects that have been detected in the master branch. So these are the projects here that have been detected, and we can add a policy around that. So I'm going to go ahead and add a license. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the Apache 2.0 license, and I'm going to go ahead and deny it. So now you can see that there's an X and the Apache 2.0 license is denied. You can also allow licenses. So I can just say MIT. And let's just allow it. And all that'll do is like when the license scanning runs, like this X actually blocks it from being merged if you have license check set up. But the check approving it will just make you feel good because it'll show it as okay, this is approved license, so you don't have to like second guess it. And any license that is not denied or approved will just show as like a gray circle telling you that we don't really know about this license. So I'll demonstrate that now on this MR. So I'll do this, create a new branch, start a merge request. So let's just say adding vulnerabilities and commit. And we can just say adding some tests. And then, okay. So then we'll follow the standard workflow, adding milestones, reviewers, assigning anybody, and then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and submit this merge request. So first thing you notice is that the pipeline's running on this feature branch. You also notice that requires 2 or more approvals from license check and vulnerability check. So you can see here that it requires approval from these users for the license check and the vulnerability check. And so you have to wait for the pipeline to finish for it to actually be present. So you don't know right now. We'll have to see if there's any actual vulnerabilities or incompatible license. So we'll wait for that to go ahead and run. But your pipeline after this and submitting the merge request should look like this.
Fern, does that mean there's a window of opportunity there where you could merge vulnerable code before those merge request approval rules kick in?
So if you're an administrator and you do have the authority to merge, you can. But if this thing is set up properly, then I won't be able to, right? Because I won't have the permission to be able to, I would have to be one of these people to approve it myself and be able to just merge this.
I see. You can't merge until the pipeline succeeds anyway. So you have to wait for that to succeed. And when that succeeds, the license check and the vulnerability check kicks in. Yep.
Correct. Yeah. But if I am the admin, right? Like I can just merge it. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and then James also brought a good point. So if you're the admin, you can also just push directly to the master branch without even, you know, through the CLI without even doing anything, or you can just even commit it with the web IDE to master. So. But yeah, there should be safeguards and check. And of course, it's also up to like, you know, like company policies and like policies within the team to understand like, hey, we're not, you know, different organizations and different teams work differently. So there'll be just different guidelines set like, hey, don't merge your own thing. There'll be kind of an honor system around that as well. These are kind of just extra safeguards to make sure that people don't accidentally, you know, merge this code and then it could cause things to go into production and cause issues. So, okay, this is running. So another thing to note is that you won't see the security stuff until the pipeline is complete, until all the security scans are complete, and then you'll start seeing the different things. So while that's running, I can show you in the project that I was using. So this is what you'll get after. So you'll get this security scan detected, 23 potential vulnerabilities. You can see that this security scan is out of date because it's different changes that have been made to master that are not within the feature branch. So there would have to be a rebase for this to be in sync. Let's see. So You can expand this and you'll see everything sorted by the different scanners. And then coverage, there'll be everything that can be seen there. And then you'll click on the vulnerability. And what you'll see is just issues around that. So, and then as I discussed, you can create an issue or dismiss a vulnerability with a comment. So you can go here, create an issue. And what this will do is it'll create a confidential issue that developers and the security team can all work through it without letting anyone externally know. So let's say this is an open source project, or and we don't want this vulnerability to be known, so we can work on it privately and fix it and push it before anyone knows that it was a vulnerability. And the same thing is done with confidential merge requests, just a merge request that others can, only those with access can see. So can security settings be part of a project template? I don't think so. I'm not aware if they can or not, but I don't think you can put security settings in the template. But then again, I'm not too familiar with that. If anyone else can answer that.
There's an Epic open. I'm looking for it right now. Okay, yeah, here it is. So basically there's I've had several groups lately who are extremely interested in having like a security group or a management group or whatever who defines a set of rules which every project underneath must follow, such as, yeah, exactly, compliance pipelines. That's, I just pasted the Epic in here. Yeah, basically what they're trying to do is they want to make it where the security team can define a set of standards and security scans and rules that every entity must follow. And then when I go in and create a new project, well, I don't have the privileges to change what Fern told me I have to do. And for instance, SVB we're working with right now, they're very interested in that.
And right now, I think that's only offered on GitLab private from what I remember. I don't know if it's been put in GitLab.com yet.
There's still a lot, we still have a long way to go on it. We are rolling out features right now. We've got a couple that are out there. We've got a couple that are coming soon. But this is something that the customers I've shown it, or the people that we've shown it to lately, that we've shown the Epic and we've shown the progression, they've been happy with the fact that we're aggressively working on this, or that we're actively working on it, but it's not completely done yet.
Awesome, thanks, James. So, so then you can create these issues to work on it independently. So that's most of the stuff. So I've already gone over most of the security scans, the interactions between developers, what AppSec can do, the security dash. So I can go over a little bit about this actual dashboard here. So this dashboard, nothing new hasn't been introduced, but this is just a good way of assessing the posture of your project, security posture of your project over time. And it'll show you a chart of like how many vulnerabilities were introduced on a particular day. So it does a 365 view, and it'll tell you like, hey, these vulnerabilities were introduced. Hey, these were fixed. And it'll kind of show you kind of like a graph of what's been fixed, what has been introduced over time. So it's good to just see, the status of your project and all the progress that you've done, and have charts so that way you can show, different executives and administrations how things have resolved over time, or maybe doing all this refactoring, it was worth the time because it fixed all these issues, or maybe introducing this new integration caused us to have all this backlog of things to do because it introduced these vulnerabilities. So it's good to kind of show data on vulnerabilities. And another thing is that this can also be seen at the group level. So, so here I have a whole bunch of different projects here. And if I go here and I go to the security dashboard, you can see this at the group level. So it'll show vulnerabilities over time for all my projects. So you can see within the last 60 days, how many vulnerabilities were introduced, the percentage introduced. And there's also security status on the projects. So you can see, this will have higher unknown vulnerabilities, This one has, critical ones, and then these will be the ones that have minor vulnerabilities. There's also a vulnerability report. So the vulnerability report that you saw for a project can also be seen for your whole group. So if you want to figure out like, hey, today we're doing a bug hunt day, for example. So we want everyone to see all the vulnerabilities within the system, and we want our developers to just go through and kind of try to resolve different bugs. They can see every bug detected within all the group of their projects, and then sort through there and be able to try to go and resolve them and assess. Or you can go, oh, what I need to solve critical vulnerabilities. Let's see all my projects to have critical vulnerabilities, and I can go through there and try to resolve that and assess that way. And I can even export this as a CVS, so that way I can use different tools for data analytics. Maybe I can use pandas or matplotlib on Python to get more statistics on this data. So gives you a whole bunch of stuff that's very configurable. And then the compliance dashboard. This is kind of the stuff that James was talking about, that there's a lot more features being done into there, but it just kind of gives you just different activity on merge requests, and you can list them all and see what's been done and things have been approved. You can also go into audit events and just see different things that have happened. So there's not really anything here. So it'll show things like if SSH keys have been added, and let me just do a quick search. I can tell you exactly what. So it'll tell you like these are the types of events that will be shown in a group. So you can see like different variables were added, different users added, different users have signed in, anything changed, and same thing for projects. So it's always good to know, because you can tell users that we keep an audit trail of stuff, and they might want to know what exactly we keep a trail of, and that's what's stored within the audit events. So yeah, so if you want to go ahead and continue with the project, it seems like this finished, and you might have to refresh it. But you can see now that it found 45 potential vulnerabilities. And you can see a lot of them were involving the Kubernetes Manifest not being production ready. So these are just the info, and this will be kind of like, it's probably not ready for, because it doesn't have a memory limit. It doesn't have a CPU limit. So these are things that you want to do in Kubernetes to make sure that your application doesn't use more memory than it should and will cause other pods to fail to provision. Same with memory. Yeah, so you can see. So this is the issue that Ron was talking about. See how it shows fixed, even though that these were newly introduced vulnerabilities, they're being shown as fixed, even though they're not fixed. So this is a known kind of issue. So I'll report it again to the container scanning team, but this should be shown as new vulnerabilities that are detected, not as fixed ones. So just in case anyone wonders why it says fixed, it's something that it should be new. And DAS vulnerabilities. So here's the cool thing about DAS vulnerabilities. They give you a lot of information, including the actual request that was sent and the response that was sent. So you can see the requests and response sent, and you can see exactly everything that's going on. So that way you can even mimic the request yourself and send different data to try to better debug what the issue is, and then it'll give you a solution of what exactly you should do and links to more information on that. So now, after going over all that, and then you can see these approvals are here, and those with permissions will be able to approve this. I didn't put my own user. I guess I put somebody else, so I can't approve it, but I would need one of these people to approve this. And same thing with license. You can see that there is a denied license there, which was the Apache license that we denied. So I won't be able to get this merged unless someone approves it. because of this incompatible license. So after going over all that, I know it was a lot of information all at once. So is there any questions around that? And after that, I'll move over to coverage fuzzing.
So question on that DAS scanning, right? Between the on-demand scanning and the DAS scanning as part of the pipeline. Is there any? What are your thoughts? Maybe I should frame it that way on best practice guidance in terms of when to do that, how often to do that. I mean, I know Auto DevOps includes it as part of the Auto DevOps pipeline each and every time. But if you're saying that you're doing penetration testing, against the environment, even if it is a temporary environment, is that something that should or should not be done? Well, what are your thoughts on that?
So it kind of just depends on the way that you want to do it. The thing with DAST is that it can potentially have an impact on that staging environment. So it can perform something where it might break staging. So some developers may want to have two different staging environments, one where they run DAST on and one where they don't. So in that case, they'll have the pipeline run without DAST, and then they'll run DAST themselves on the other environment. So it just kind of depends on what the organization wants. There's really no like right way of doing it or wrong way of doing it. It just really depends. Do you really need to run DAST every single time, or do you have a process where on a weekly build is when we're going to run DAST and then assess those issues?
Okay, thank you.
And it also depends, like DAST may take a long time because of the spider. DAST may take a really long time to run. Right now, this is a small application with just few paths, but let's say you do have like a giant application that has, that has this whole just suite of just different paths and different endpoints, and you're running all these different pipelines. You may not want to be running it per se on that. You may run it on your own timeline when you want to. So that's like the benefit of the on-demand scans.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So the next lesson, something that's relatively new to GitLab.
Fern.
Yeah.
Let's take maybe like a 10-minute break.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we'll do a 10-minute break, and we'll be back at 10:47 or 47, whatever first number, and then 47 your time.
Sweet. And don't go through your Slack on the screen.
Oh, you can see it? All right. Well, anyways. So yeah, let's take a break. I'm gonna go get coffee. And yeah, when we get back, we'll do lesson 4, coverage based fuzz testing.
So, hey, Fern, I think it was a bad idea for us to download the dependencies from local, because now we hit the throttle of like the virtual machines on our side. If we would have just left it downloading from Docker Hub, we would have hit their throttle and it wouldn't hurt ours. Right?
I see what you mean.
See what I mean? It's that whole thing. You always, you fix one thing and it's like you're going to notice the next thing down. If we would have just left the GitHub, or the Docker Hub throttling, then, the runners would have been fine.
Yeah, I mean, we learn from these things. It's all good.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, if it doesn't break, you didn't, or if it goes perfect, you didn't learn anything. So something's got to break.
It's better to learn. Yeah. So yeah, and then what I'll do is, so the way that this is going to work is, yeah, well, after a break, I come back to coverage fuzzing, web API fuzzing, then we'll take another little break, and then I'll transition into going over active security, which will be container network scanning and container host security, and then that'll be pretty quick. And then after that, we'll just go over any further questions that everyone has. And then from there, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and whatchamacallit, and post this recording on GitLab Unfiltered, and then that way everyone can have it to see and just kind of go over that. And let's use the Zoom chat because I can see it better on my screen over the Slack, so I don't have to keep going back and forth. Okay, I'm just gonna get some coffee for a second. I'll be back.
All right. Starting to get back.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, my AirPods disconnect and connect, so. All right. So now let's go over coverage-based fuzzing. So coverage-based fuzzing allows you to actually add instrumentation to your code, to your file, and then a fuzz test will run against that and pick up and send pretty much what fuzzing does is it sends a bunch of random data, like maybe really, really large strings or maybe an integer or a bunch of random data to the function to try to get it to crash. So that way, maybe there was an exception that you didn't, you didn't cover. Now you'll be able to find that this is crashing your application. And what I'll do is now I can add code to go ahead and cover that exception. So it's also a good tool for security as well, because breaking the application, this code can also make it vulnerable as well. So within this, I'm gonna go ahead and set up coverage-based fuzzing, and then I'm gonna go over it and show the results and how it caught something. So first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and open the web IDE. And within the GitLab CI.yaml, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna remove these security scans. And I'm just going to put coverage fuzzing. Now, ideally, you would have everything together within the pipeline, but I'm just gonna do coverage fuzzing so that the pipeline runs faster. I'm gonna add my fuzz target. So this will be a separate job. So it's using the Python 3.9.1 image. It extends fuzz base, which is like a GitLab template for the fuzzing. And I created this stage called cfuzz. So we can go ahead and configure it wherever and run it wherever we want. So I'm going to run it here. So it'll build, it'll do coverage fuzzing, and then after that, it'll deploy. So right now, this syntax is needed in order to actually use fuzzing. This will be changed later on as it matures, but if you go to GitLab, so let's go to coverage fuzzing. So you'll see here that coverage fuzzing is available for these languages, and it'll tell you how you need to set this up. So you need to include the template, and then you'll need to write a script that tells the template how to run. So like this kind of goes over everything that you need. Extend the fuzz base, compile the fuzz target. So for Go fuzz, if you're using the Golang, you'll have to do it in a different manner. If you're using Python, you have to do it in a different manner. So then this provides you just examples in case anyone wants to know how to do it for a different language. These are the languages that we offer. And then this is how you do it for these languages. So for Go, for example, you can see the Go fuzzing example. You can look at the CI YAML, and then you can see that my fuzz target has a different script that installs the dependencies for Go fuzz. And each of them will be different. So it's always good to kind of look at this documentation. And they all use a different open source fuzzing engine. So same thing with SAST, right? These use open source tools that are not maintained by us, but we maintain the local infrastructure with it running on there. So let's go back. So I've added the cfuzz, I've added this test, I've added the coverage fuzzing template. So now I'm going to go ahead and commit this. And here you can see the changes. So coverage fuzzing. Oh, and I forgot to add the file. So right now it's running coverage fuzzing on this fuzz.py. So I have to create that file that it's going to run on. So in the base path, I'm going to add fuzz.py create. And let's go back to the lesson. So just going to create this file, and I'll go over this now. So right here, I'm adding a decorator that tells PyFuzz to run on this particular function. So PyFuzz will then send random data to this buff, to this parameter. So this buff will contain different random data that will then be decoded to ASCII. And then there'll be an exception that's a Unicode decode error, and then from there we'll pass. So it just creates a parser and it sends it data that was generated from this buffer that we passed through the fuzz. And then just since its main function will just run whenever this Python script is initiated, it'll go ahead and just run this fuzz. So let me go ahead and commit that, commit it to master. And this is the pipeline running, and we'll wait for this job to finish. Now, let me just show you one thing. So sometimes within an MR, you'll be actually able to see the coverage fuzzing. So you'll be actually able to see it there. I haven't had much luck seeing it every single time. But there's a way to view it. There's a way to view it by actually downloading the file and going into the job itself. And what ideally would happen is it'll be shown in the same template with all the different security scans. So you should be able to see it here. Coverage fuzzing detected one potential vulnerability, and you should be able to see it there whenever there is anything checked in that could be an issue. But sometimes that doesn't show, but that's the way it kind of should be. See, he didn't see, if you see in this commit, like there was nothing detected. There was nothing detected at all, right? For fuzzing that the fuzzer is running on. The fuzzer is on master, but you can see that within this merge request, it's showing that a coverage fuzzing vulnerability was caught. So this is kind of something that's still being worked on. It's still kind of a newer feature, this coverage-based fuzzing. So ideally, this will be the way that it'll be shown in the future, and it wouldn't have to be done through the job, and it would only be detected on the feature branch and new things. But this is still something that's kind of in its infancy and it's being worked on. So you'll be able to see the crash type, which was an uncaught exception. And here you can see the stack trace of what the exception is and what caused the crash. So you can see that the crash was in the parser, and the issue that was caught was the not implemented error. So yeah, and you can go what an uncaught exception is, and you can find out more. But ideally, it would mean that in that you should catch all the different exceptions. So fuzzing and penetration testing, I haven't seen that being used interchangeably. That's a question Chester asked. Penetration testing would be more trying to intrude on the system and try to break everything through it. DAS could be a form of penetration testing, but usually when they hire a pen tester or someone from the red team, they would use a bunch of different tools to try to break the system, try to break the authentication, try to get in. But fuzzing is scoped towards a different thing. Fuzzing is just, we're going to send all this random stuff and just try to break it and detect it. So I haven't really seen them used interchangeably. I don't know if anyone else has. If you have, just please, you can feel free to add to this conversation. So going back to this, so you can see that the coverage-based fuzzing is running, and you can see, and this might take a long time to run, so I'm not gonna, I'll let you like see it yourself once it's complete. but it'll build the application, and then it'll go ahead and run all the different random data pass through to try to get it to break. So it could be a really long running job. And this is what it'll look like once it's complete. CD. And I'll go here. And you'll see that it failed. And that's normal. The job right now is going to be showing as a failure because it broke and it crashed because of the uncaught exception. And what you would do is here you can actually download all the job artifacts, or you can browse through them. And when you browse through them, you can see this report, coverage fuzzing, and it tells you exactly what it was. So then here you see, then this was what would populate the MR report. And you can see that it was an uncaught exception. And then you can see exactly what it ran with. And you can see that it rose the not implemented error. And that's the exception that you should catch. So you should catch for a not implemented exception and then throw an actual error and not have the application crash. So then it'll tell the developer to go ahead and do that. And this is very different than web API fuzzing, which I'll go into next, but this is actually going into the source code and performing fuzzing on functions themselves for coverage. So that's the way to know it. Coverage-based fuzzing is going to be in the application itself, in the functions themselves, in the lower level code, where web API fuzzing, which I'll show next, is going to be actually hitting the running application and then trying to send random data to it to kind of expose it and try to get it to crash. So you can run that yourself and see kind of that with the coverage-based fuzzing. So, and now I'll go ahead and move on to lesson 5, which is web API fuzzing. But before that, any questions on coverage-based fuzzing? And it's just part of the full set solution. So you want to have security scans that find known vulnerabilities, but you also want to have, so this is kind of how you showcase this to the customer. Our security scanners are going to find known vulnerabilities, right? That we know based off of CVEs, but our fuzzing is going to find things that are not known within your application that are potential security risks, because it's sending all this random data. So you can say, this is used for known things to make sure your system is secure, but then this is also to find things that you may not have known were a problem within your system. So that being said, I'm going to go over the web API fuzzing. And to do that, I'm going to open up the web IDE. And just to show you, and I like going over the docs because we have really good documentation on all this stuff. So, and it's easy to just Google. So we can do web API fuzzing, GitLab. So here, you can see that web API fuzzing requires one of the following web API types. So it requires REST API, SOAP, GraphQL, or JSON of some sort. So what I'm going to be showing you is the REST API that my application has. And then it also requires one of the following assets. So it requires OpenAPI, it requires Postman collection, or HTTP archive, which right now I'm using OpenAPI v2, which is the same thing as Swagger. So it's like what used to be called Swagger has been changed to being called OpenAPI. So I'm going to go ahead and build all of that kind of from scratch and then show you all how it works. So here I give detailed information on how to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a file in the root called GitLab API Fuzzing. So GitLab API Fuzzing, we go ahead and create that, and then we copy the contents of this file. So we're going to copy the contents of this file, and what this contains are like the different rules that can be run. So there'll be a profile for what a quick scan is. There'll be a profile for what quick 10 scan is, what a medium scan is. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you can actually run. There's different variety of profile and tests, and this will continue to advance. But what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just paste this with containing all the different profiles. Then I'm going to create a open API file, which is the Swagger file. So I'll go ahead and create this in the IDE. So I'll do new file. I'll create this JSON. And this is what it's going to look like. So this is a sample for this specific web application. Now, it's also important to note your customers may already have something like this. So it's good to note that if they already have a Swagger or open API, they can already just integrate it and just change the application path, and it'll work off the bat. So what I'll do is I'll go here, I'll add this, and the only thing I'll need to change here, so you can see that it's going to work on the path/add. So it'll hit the base path/notes. It'll hit the path/add on this host. I have to make sure that if you're doing this yourself, you have to make sure that this was just kind of a stub project ID, but you'll have to change it to your own project ID. So you can find that here. So you'll grab this project ID and you'll change this. So that way it'll work properly. Okay, so in the GitLab CI YAML, I also have to make some changes as well. So I have to add this template, which is the API fuzzing template. So I'll go ahead and I'll remove coverage fuzzing so we can just have this run. And I'm going to have to add some variables to tell the Fuzz API what profile to use, what file to run against, as well as what endpoint to hit. So I can just do this. I don't need so it'll use the quick 10 profile that I defined here. Which runs these different checks that are defined within a template. It'll use this file, which contains the host, contains the base path that it'll hit, and contains the other paths. Right now, I've only added the add path. That's the one we're checking. And I've added a definition to it. And this is how it's going to test it. It's going to try passing objects with using this example. Then I'm telling this is the base URL. So this is the URL of the main application that it's going to be targeting. And then from there, it'll hit the /notes. And then from there, it'll hit the /add based off of the open API file. Then I have to add a stage called fuzz, which is where it'll run. So it'll run after the deploy stage. It'll run fuzz on the path where it was deployed. And I'm just going to delete my fuzz target to just simplify this. So now what I do is I'm just going to commit this. And another important thing to note is for this to be working, you need to have a base path that has something that can be detected, right? So right now, if I were to go to this URL, there is something running on it. So, and I can show you that. So see the simple notes, right? That's running on my ID and it's running this application. There needs to be something running on the base path. So that way it can be detected. So right here on the base path, I'm just running a simple little application that just sends back the request. So just note that if for some reason it's not working, it's because you need to include there needs to be something running on a base path that does something, because if not, it'll detect the 404 and the scanner won't run. And that's something that probably needs to be addressed in the future, but right now that's how it works. So let me go back to the IDE. I'll go ahead and commit my changes, commit it to the master branch. And right now, you can see that it's running. So while that's running, I'm going to go ahead and show you what it looks like on the other applications. So, okay. So now that it's running, I added a bug to it. So I'm telling the pipeline to run to return a 500. So here in the routes.py, there's a function for add, which is the one that we're checking on. And the function for add has a path that if the length is greater than 1024, the length of the message is greater than 1024, then we're going to throw an error. And originally it was a 400, right? So it'll say like, hey, this is the message is too long. Let's just throw a 400. We're not going to accept that. But I changed it to throw a 500. So that way that the server would actually throw an error code. And normally this is just to kind of show you how it works, but normally you wouldn't throw a 500, right? Normally the 500 would just be thrown when an uncaught exception is found within the server, something that the server didn't know about. And this is what that'll determine. But here for testing purposes, I am throwing it myself. And let me show you what you'll see. So you'll see it that security scanning detected one potential vulnerability. And there'll be a section for API fuzzing with that potential vulnerability. And you can click on it and you'll see exactly what was sent. So you can see that in this request, someone sent this really long message and it'll send a bunch of random characters, it'll send emojis, it'll send pretty much anything that it thinks that the system won't be able to accept to try to break it. And then if you had an unmodified normal response, which was just sending meow, then you'll see that it'll have a 200 as okay. But that response that we got was a 500 server error saying that the message is too long. So it's giving us some information as why it crashed. And this is the request. So now I can send requests to my staging environment that look like this all day until I figure out what the issue is. And I'll keep sending it again until it doesn't find the issue, or I can keep, resolving the MR until it's not there. So it gives us all this information like, oh, the original value was meow, and that worked, but the mutated value was this craziness right here, and that failed. So that gave us the 500. So we're able to detect these issues. So, so one big thing to notice and to know, like one of the big benefits of this is that everything is in a standard interface. So you have all your security scans running in one interface. You have all your fuzzing running in interface. You have everything, all your licenses, everything is within that same MR interface. And that's one of the really important things to note. Now, one question that I have myself is that can that stuff be seen in the vulnerability report? And I think you can actually sort by, so you can actually have coverage fuzzing and API fuzzing within the same vulnerability report. They can be treated as vulnerabilities within the system as well. So that's one key takeaway is like you get all this in the same standard interface. You can assess them, you can triage them, you can manage them all the same way, whether it be fuzz scans, security scans, anything like that. So, and part of the lesson, if you want to do this kind of at your own pace, would be in these sessions. I'll show how to actually create the vulnerability. So to create this vulnerability, it's pretty simple. You'll just open up the web IDE. You'll go to notes. You'll go to routes. What was the routes? Okay, yeah, notes, routes. And then you see this where it says in the add route, you'll go to line 52, where the length is greater than 1024, and you just change this to a 5. And then we'll create a new match that says web API or web fuzz. And then you can test this. It'll come up with the same license check, vulnerability check, and then once it's done running, it'll display it there. So that's web API fuzzing in a nutshell. So any questions on that? I know it's kind of like a fairly new thing. That's there's continuous improvement on everything with web API fuzzing, and it's kind of a big part of our Peach Fuzz acquisition. It's things that they've been working on. So it's kind of a pretty cool product, pretty cool feature that's there. And I would look at the different GitLab releases because there's constantly stuff being added to it. I think there's even a way to to configure it through here. So I think that's like a new thing. I think you might be able to configure API fuzzing and enable it through here. I think that's something that's coming soon on that. So, and then this, okay, so I didn't go over this, but this is kind of for someone new setting this stuff up and not using auto DevOps. They can actually, without adding the template directly to the YAML file, they can create an MR to add that template, and they can configure it the way that they want. So like they can see in this kind of thing right now, I've only seen it available for SAST, but they can go here and they can enable it. And they can enable how exactly they want SAST to run and what stage they want it to run, what depth, what paths to exclude, what image to use. And they can even change it to be their own image or an older image. And then they can create a merge request to actually get SAST into their pipeline, into their GitLab CI YAML to run the pipeline. So that's another cool little to know things. Not like something crazy, but it's a pretty cool little feature.
Hey, Fern, this is Chester. This is super interesting. The question that I was had in mind was, are there any application types where fuzzing doesn't make sense? So if the examples you showed were for web applications, when you can test web APIs and whatnot, if a customer was to put an application to, let's say, a hardware device, would fuzzing make sense in that scenario? Or are there any other scenarios where fuzzing doesn't quite make sense?
I think fuzzing would make sense in most scenarios, right? Because with coverage fuzzing, you're trying to, it's kind of like unit testing in a sense, right? Like unit testing makes sense in any type of application. So at the same time, with coverage fuzzing, you're trying to unit test things with random data, right? So it helps you write better unit tests essentially with the coverage-based fuzzing. And then the web API fuzzing would be just for web API, something that has like an exposed API that's being used. So I would say probably in most cases, you would be wanting to use some type of fuzzing in general, right? To just make sure that your application is more secure. It'll help you write better unit tests and better functional tests in the case of web API fuzzing. So it enhances kind of the test suite. But yeah, I'm not sure where it wouldn't be beneficial. I mean, even if, I guess there's just languages that we don't offer it in, maybe like lower level languages where we don't offer that type of fuzzing. In that sense, maybe, that won't be able to be run, and you won't be able to run fuzzing on like, let's say like Kubernetes and like manifest files and static things like that, like configurations and things like that. But in terms of source code, I mean, it's always a good idea. And in terms of like an API, it's always a good idea.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I have a question. Talking about the different security job and stage that we have, which of them are requiring that the first part of the auto-DevOps pipeline is in place? Because we know that in the first stage, we create some environment variable that are used from the following steps. which are exactly the requirement before running fast testing or SAS testing or whatever, what I can't remove from out of DevOps?
Okay, no, that's a good question. So let me show, I think it could be good to go into here. So these static scans right here, they work on source code. So license scanning, container scanning, dependency scanning, SAS, they all work on source code. So there's no dependency. They can just run and scan on anything, right? There doesn't need to be anything.
And in fact, I saw that sometimes we are triggering them before that, for instance, the build job is completed for the same reason.
Correct. You can do that before the build job. You can do that before the build job. It's just up to preference, right? So usually I run the build job first because I feel like if the application doesn't even build, then I don't even want to care if like the like if there's anything I want to fix the build first. So that's usually why I did it in that order. But yeah, these can technically be run in any order and they have no dependency. Same thing for coverage fuzzing. Coverage fuzzing has no dependency. It just uses the source code. Then for web API fuzzing and DAST, they'll depend on building the image, and they'll depend on actually deploying the image, whether it be to its own environment or whether it be using the review app. They'll depend on this.
And regarding the microservice-based application, sometimes we know that I have not that scenes to test a single component that is deployed by one single project. How I can manage to make, for instance, a fast test on an application that is made over 5, for instance, GitLab projects? Is something that we are able to do easily, or some voodoo is required in the pipeline?
So you're saying like you have 5 different so coverage-based fuzzing would only be for the lines of code, right? So they would be independent to everything. But web API fuzzing should only, like, so let's say you're dependent on a bunch of different microservices running, right? It would still be in the project and it should still be scoped towards running what you need to run, like a certain path. But when you deploy to staging, that staging environment should have all the containers that you need. So it does require some extra thinking, right, before setting it up, and that's part of the architecture. But ideally, what you would have is, say you have 5 different projects, right?
Yeah.
All these projects should all deploy to the same staging environment, and all these containers will be running in that staging environment. And then what you would do is you would run an on-demand DAST job, right? That will hit the endpoint that you needed to hit, that consists of, that will go through the flow of microservice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then give you the success or failure. So it's mainly an architectural, discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But that would be a good thing in the future. I'm gonna add a note to myself to try in the future. What I ideally like is a more real. So Simply Simple Notes is like a cool little application that we use for demos and stuff. But ideally, in the future, a good thing to have would be more of an application that's based off of like 3 or 4 microservices, and then we can kind of show these things where, hey, we're deploying all these 4 microservices that are in a group. We're deploying them all to the staging environment. Now we're going to run DAST and see the full flow, because each microservice is kind of dependent on each other. Like one microservice, adds the notes, but the other microservice maintains statistics of the notes, and the other one, and they're all kind of dependent on each other for the flow, or have a different. Or if the architecture was each of them has a different function, then you would run the scans independently, right? So let's say they all work together, but they all have different functions, then you would run them independently.
Yeah, to give you a real instance, I made a project containing WordPress that I think everybody know. A project was containing just the WordPress core. A project was containing the theme for a front end developer team, and a project was containing the plugin. Each of those projects was mainly the build and making the static code analytics. Another project that could be triggered by the multi-project pipeline run manually was assembling the final application and performing over there the, let me say, dynamic tests. But for making the last part, a lot of manual work has been required because I needed to build myself all the environment variable that are usually created by other DevOps. This is why I was thinking the same thing like that, because it's been raised at some time from some customer.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good point. I mean, that's ideally something that our team is working towards in the future, would be having something more, more dependent on a bunch of different microservices, so it can give it more of a realistic architecture of what customers are really deploying. Because everything nowadays is, a bunch of different microservices. So that's really good point there.
Thank you.
Hey, Fern, one other question. This is Chester again. If I'm approaching a conversation with a customer with the intent of having them understand that our fuzz testing capability can replace an existing tool that they have, what are some of like the popular fuzz testing applications that exist in the market that we can like our solution can compare with?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, I'm not exactly too sure, because we're one of the only ones really offering at least coverage-based fuzzing. I know we're one of the only companies really offering that, besides the open source tools that exist. We're offering it as a solution using those open source tools. So I don't really know many companies actually offering that. And for web API, I'm sure the ones that'll be like kind of like things like AppScan and things like that, which provide DAST as well. So it would be kind of similar DAST companies that provide some type of web API fuzzing. But I'd have to get back to you on that with the list. I talked to Cindy about that. Cindy Blake. She'd provide some really good information on competitors with fuzz testing. But I'm not really too sure of many people that we compete with our fuzz testing.
Okay, thank you.
And if anyone has any input on that, feel free to share.
Hey, Fern, a question for you. I think it's probably limited, but any type of, like yesterday I had a call with Boston Scientific. They work with medical devices and they like to do some fuzzing against some of the protocols on which the devices are connected. So for example, on Bluetooth or on 802.3 for Ethernet. I think we don't do anything in that area, but yeah, maybe I'm missing that from my end. Do you have any thoughts on that, on how we can help those types of organizations?
Right now I don't think we offer anything for that, like sending like packets to the Bluetooth device that can cause it to crash or something. I mean, everything is strictly either source code based or REST API based. So I don't think we offer anything for that at the moment. So if you look at Web API Fuzzing GitLab, for example, like this is what we support right now. So we support these different API types. So which the Bluetooth and all that is not included on there.
Okay.
It's worth speaking to Sam Kerr. Last I checked with him, protocol fuzzing is the next thing being added.
Yeah, I've started initial contact there. Yeah. So thank you, Simon.
Yeah, like I said, there's lots of there's just lots of stuff being done around fuzzing. So I would expect it to continue to grow a lot since the PeachFuzz acquisition. So I always see just new things on the GitLab releases regarding fuzzing. So cool. So after doing this, now we can see that the fuzzing was found. And you see it's the same as the other original one, with the data that I went over. And same thing, you can dismiss, and you can create issue on it, and you have different ways of reproducing it as well. So you can download the message, download the artifact, and you can do a whole bunch of like just cool stuff around that. So that there concludes the first part of the session, which is what you can do for DevSecOps. So that includes everything that's done pre-production. So everything that's done before a customer pushes into production. So the next part that I'm going to go over is what exactly happens once the application has been deployed to production. How do we protect? And that's going to be container host security and container network security. So what we'll do is we'll take a quick little break and come back at 35. And yeah, and then I'll go over that. And then we'll have a question and answer session. And then from there, what I'll try to do is within our Slack channel, I'll try to share kind of all the resources that we've gone over today, and just like different videos and different things that y'all can go over. So let's take a quick recess, and we'll be back at 11:35. All right. All right, so now we can get started with the active security portion of this workshop. So get back to sharing my screen. Okay, so active security workshop. So this, yeah. So in this section, we're going to go over what can be done in order to protect the system after things have been deployed into production. So let's go over first the configuration of the tools. I'll talk a little bit about the tools, and then we're going to go ahead and test the network policy and a container host policy. So the tools that we use are Cilium for, so we use Cilium to create Kubernetes network policies. And what this does is it creates policies around what pods can communicate with what other pods. So it'll create network rules for the ingress and the egress and limit communications between different pods to further secure infrastructure. So if there's a pod that shouldn't be on your system that shouldn't be talking to another pod, that can be addressed. And maybe you want only pods with particular labels to access other pods. That's a way, that's something that can be done with network policies. So what GitLab uses on the back end is Cilium, which is based off of eBPF. So that's what we use for network policies, and then we use Falco for container host security. So what it does is it looks at the actual container, at the container runtime, and it determines if there's any issues happening. So a few things that it can look for are, hey, is a malicious file being added to the dev path, or any files being added to the dev path? What's being done on the system? And let me just show you some examples. So Falco example. So a shell is running the container. So you can see that, hey, a shell is being run in the container. This is something unexpected, or there's a unbound connection, or someone's writing to a directory holding system binary. So it looks through a lot of different rule sets, and then you can even customize your own to see if someone's doing something malicious within the system or something unexpected, where things change to another namespace, where the non-device file is written to dev. Did someone try to access the camera from your system? There's just so many things that you can do, and all these things run within the container itself. So now let me go over kind of just setting these things up. So in order to set it up, there's a few things that you need to do. So there is, where is it? So you need to add this file, .gitlab, manage apps, and config.yaml. And you're going to have to tell GitLab to install Cilium. And you're going to have to tell GitLab to install Falco. So, so these two things have to be done. And I just defined the cluster type as the GKE cluster that I'm running on. So that's one step. Another step is within the GitLab CI YAML, you have to add this template right here, manage cluster applications, which adds the apply job, and the apply job installs all these applications into your Kubernetes cluster. So so if I go here on my terminal, if I do kubectl get namespace, there's going to be a namespace called GitLab Managed Apps. So you can see here. And then if I do get kubectl get pods -n, and I provide this namespace, you can see that Cilium's installed. You can see that Falco's installed and running. You can see that the last time it was actually deployed on there, and then you can see, a few things crashed here, but you can see that Ingress and Prometheus. So everything that I specified in that file goes ahead and installs into the GitLab Managed Apps namespace. So one other thing that needs to be done is within your cluster, where's the operations, Kubernetes, within your actual cluster, under advanced settings, you need to set the cluster management project to the project that you're using that it'll deploy on. So, and that what that does is it allows it to run these installation tasks as a cluster admin. So once that's all set up, you'll have Cilium running in your infrastructure. You'll have Falco running on your infrastructure via this job. That one. Via this, where is it? Okay, it was removed there. Via this apply job right here. So this apply job right here will go ahead and install Falco, and it'll install everything that was in that template in Cilium, and kind of Ingress and everything else that I defined within this .gitlab managed apps config. And then further on, you can even add values.yaml within different files. So the documentation will give you better information on how to do it, but you can even add custom rules for Falco. So this, I added a rule that if a new directory is detected, then it'll go ahead and for example, the makedir item was found, then it'll create an issue that a new directory was detected within the container, within the volume that was mounted. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you so I'll go over container host security right now and kind of show you how that works. So right now there is a thing called threat monitoring, and there are policies right here. And within policies, you can scope towards an environment. So I'm gonna scope towards staging, and I already created this network policy. And what this network policy does is on any application named test, I'm not going to allow any ingress to it unless it has the label access equals true. So any pod running within my cluster that's accessing any pod that has the label app equals test is not going to be able to access it unless it contains the label access equals true. So let me show you while this network policy is disabled, then I'll enable it, kind of show you a little bit how that works. So let's go into our staging environment. So kubectl get pods or get namespace. And this is our staging environment that we looked at. So we'll do kubectl get pods -n. Okay. So we see this test running. So let's make sure that, so test access equals app equals test. So let's take a look at this pod. CTL describe. And then we will, what's the namespace? Oh. Okay, so this has app equals test. So we're gonna let's create a new BusyBox container, and then what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to access this. So I'm going to create a new pod running on here, and I'm going to try to access this pod via the service. So let's just get the services. kubectl get and okay. So we're going to have to try hitting it through the test service. So I have some instructions here. So I have the instructions copied. Okay. So I'm going to run kubectl run BusyBox, and let me just put it in the right namespace. Okay, so now I'm running BusyBox. I'm running a new container and I'm executing into it. Okay, so now what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to access via the service, so test SDC. So you can see remote file exists. So it was able to connect to the test SVC. So now we're going to create the network policy. So now let me exit out of this. So BusyBox is deleted. So now let's go back to here. And now let's go ahead and enable this policy, which is going to say, hey, now we can't access that. We can't access that until unless it has the label access equals true. So I'm going to go ahead and enable this. Apply changes. So policy test access was successfully changed. So now I don't remember how to get there. Okay, network policies. Okay, so you can see that the test access for the pod selector, test equals true, test access names policy exists. So now what should happen is when I run BusyBox again, I should try to do the wget again, and it should fail if the policy is running correctly. So if I do wget /spider /timeout equals 1, and I try to do the test SVC, I believe it was called, then it should fail to connect. So that means that the network policy wasn't didn't apply. So it may take some time for that change to apply. It may actually apply once the actual thing is run, once the job is rerun. So that's one thing to consider. Let's see. See if I can just delete it and just make a new one. Yeah, there's no way to delete it. Okay. Oh. Okay, so. Okay, so it shouldn't be there anymore. So now let's create a new policy. That's created in staging, YAML mode. There should be one similar here. App equals test. Let's create the policy. Policies, staging, access true, enable just now. Let's make sure it's in the Kubernetes. Okay, it's there. So app equals test. So now let's try the same. Okay, for some reason it's not applying it. I'll have to debug that and troubleshoot that. But ideally what would happen is that once hitting the test SVC, it should fail on this and the remote file should not exist unless a particular label is present. So if I look at get pods, what is that?
So Fern, may I have a question here?
Yes.
I'm thinking about the usage pattern around this. You are now changing the policies via GUI. In a real organization that would have multiple owners and likely approvals and all that flow. Is there a way to do it more in a GitOps way via merge request, where changing the policy is actually, change of actual file in the repository? And what would be the best?
So yes, so that is possible as well. You can add policies to so going here, you could add policies instead of going through the GUI. One thing is you can create a merge request and add policies. So you can create a new file called Cilium. And then from there, you can add policies to a YAML and then it'll propagate those policies to the Kubernetes infrastructure.
Okay, and the way this gets enforced is via our CI or via agent, or is it more of a push model or pull model? How does it work?
It's enforced via Cilium, which is an application running on the cluster itself from the managed apps.
Okay.
So that being installed enforces these security policies.
So using GitLab, using the Kubernetes agent, we could potentially remediate any risks, even if there's no change in the policy. So we could have the agent sitting there checking that file. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yes, the agent's there and it's checking all the network policies. So every time there's a new network policy, the agent knows that it's there, and then it takes action depending on what that network policy is. So it'll take action on, so this network policy that I was trying to demonstrate right now, whatchamacallit, what it should have done is it should have blocked it because it detected this new policy there. And what it should have done is it should have blocked that request from being sent, because it shouldn't allow traffic. So every time like a new policy is there, it's kind of like IP tables. If you use that for a firewall, it's kind of like a firewall. and what it's doing is it's like blocking incoming or outgoing requests from the pods itself. And anytime there's a new policy, it'll add that to it.
Okay. Thank you for explaining this.
So I just really wish I could get it to work, but I have a video of where I have this being done on like a clean environment. Right now, I'm just trying to troubleshoot exactly what it is. So see the label app equals test, and then test SVC goes to that. So I may just need to really clean this cluster because it's been like really hit on heavy. So I'll have to get back to y'all on this after I've had the cluster cleaned up. And
Fern, can you message me the link to this project or tell me what cluster it is? I'll look into it while you're going on or while you're continuing.
Okay. Yeah. So the cluster's on
context. I just don't see the cluster.
Gotcha. The cluster is this one. It's Fern DevSecOps, but it's on GitLab demos.
All right, cool. I'll look. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So, and what I'll do is maybe I'll just kick off the pipeline so it'll just, because I haven't run this in like a month or so. So. But yeah, the file that I had that does that is this one, test network policy. And it will create the network policy as well. And it'll have this ingress path. And then what it'll do is it'll create this test SVC that selects the app test. And the app, this is the app with the app test. So then it shouldn't be able to access that unless the access equals true label is set on the pod accessing it. And what I'll do is, let me just, while that's running, I will okay, I'll delete that while this stuff is running. So this pipeline will run and do that. So that might take a little bit, but okay. So that, and then there is Falco, which is the container host security. So cube, get pods -n. So, and another thing to note about Falco is everything, all these things right now, I kind of done through the CLI being on the cluster for container host security. Like the only way to confirm it will be actually going into the cluster yourself. They're trying to make this more interactive with like upcoming releases and using more of the GUI and having users be able to really see it and making it more user friendly. But right now, a lot of it would have to be focused on like actually viewing the logs and actually viewing everything within the cluster itself. So for example, for Falco, in order to view if there was actually any issues, you would actually have to go into the Falco pods themselves and look at the logs. So for example, if I go to GitLab, let's say Falco, this will give you instructions on how to install it, like the instructions I went over, how to add the custom rules. And if you want to see the logs and see if there's any issues detected, right now, this is the way that you can do it. Eventually in the future, there's going to be like better alerts and alerting systems that will say like, hey, Falco detected something, here's an alert. And that's something that's like kind of like in beta right now. And they're working on, so you can create issues and you can create alerts based off of vulnerabilities found within Falco or within network policies. But right now, like one of the ways of seeing this would, you would have to go in here and then you would have to look through the logs and then see, oh, okay, look, file in a known directory was opened for writing. Oh, these are like some errors that we found that someone's trying to write to a file or someone's trying to do this. So eventually all that's going to come streamlined into where is it? into this threat monitoring dashboard, and there'll be statistics, and then there'll be another tab that will be able to show you alerts, and you can see alerts and you can dismiss them, and it'll work kind of like the security dashboard kind of. And I think that was introduced in 13.9, but limited availability for GitLab.com. And that's all part of the GitLab Protect stage. So I would say, like, for more information on this, you can look at kind of what's being happening. So you see the alert dashboard, and there will be scheduling policies and different things around that. So, so yeah, any questions on that while we wait kind of for this pipeline and see? I want to see if I can show you threat monitoring working, but if not, I mean, I can always provide videos and resources kind of on this stuff as well in a working environment, just in case we can't get this environment working today. But yeah, while that's running, I'd be happy to jump into any question and answer session and kind of go over anything else and just kind of address different questions. Let me. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll post the videos of these actual of container host security and container network security that were done within my environment that showcase this stuff. This may take a while for me to debug, so I won't waste all of your time on this, but I'll give you videos that kind of show exactly what I'm doing and show these solutions kind of in depth, and then you can research on that and then you know, send that to customers in case they have any questions and stuff. But for the most part, just want to, since we're still here, just want to answer any questions, anything that y'all want to go over, you know, in detail before we end up signing off.
And as a quick note, this is Ty Davis. We'll send out a survey on this workshop. Please, if you can, just provide us feedback. This is one of the the first big approaches to advanced workshops that we're taking. So any feedback is great going into developing these in the future. So appreciate it, and appreciate Fern you doing this. So look out for that in the next 24 hours.
Awesome, thank you, Ty. Oh, my dogs just started barking, so I guess they're already.
Just a quick one, Ty and Fern. Will the environments that you're using here on the demo system still be available for us for a little while to go through these workshops and such?
Yeah, they will be. Jeff, you can confirm that. But we at the moment we have another workshop here planned in 2 weeks. This exact same one for security. So I assume that they're going to stay live all through that, maybe afterwards as well.
Workshops normally expire the day after.
They do, okay.
But let me double check real quick. Generally they expire, but what you can always do is move the project that got created underneath the IU, underneath all the training user namespace, move it over into your namespace, and then it will persist. So if you want to hold on to it, the reason we do this for garbage collection, because all the pipelines and such that were deployed, they run perpetually, right? And that costs us a lot of money. So we try to garbage collect and clean those things up. So if you want to keep your projects, go ahead and move it to your namespace. That's your safest bet right now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Sorry for misspeaking.
Jeff, the documentation project that outlines the steps, is that in a permanent space? I haven't looked lately, but.
We do have a to-do on our end to move that over. Where that ends up going is under the training and workshop projects, the top level group under the demo systems. It'll be over there shortly here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that'd be helpful. Otherwise we lose that.
Yeah.
But we could copy that. We could clone that project or whatever into our own namespace as well, correct?
Absolutely. Feel free to copy it now if you want.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'll go ahead and send you that. If there's not anything else, then we can have some time back. And yeah, I'm really happy to have been able to host this, and thank you all to James and Jeff and everyone who's kind of assisted on this and helped make this thing possible. So thank you everybody, and I hope everyone enjoyed this. And if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to me on Slack, and I'll be monitoring that channel. So, or just reach out to me through the technical marketing channel or kind of anywhere else, and just give input, and we'll try to address any questions. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Vern.
Yeah, thanks. Have a great day, y'all.
Bye.
Fern, do you have the recording or?
I have it. I have it on my computer. I'm gonna post it on Unfiltered.
Okay, cool. Appreciate it. Thanks, Fern.
And I'll probably have to
Bye.
wait about an hour
Bye,
for
everyone.
it to transcode it. But yeah, 3-hour video. It's going to take a little while, but thanks to really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.